to the situation where people keep on asking, and the money spent on the weapons, can they bring to any peace? So, as the weapons brought to this territory, how can it bring peace? It's absolutely nonsense. So you need to relieve the territory from the weapons and maybe to give control over the state under the international platform. You know, I'd like to reiterate the President's, Mr. Putin's statement during the first months of the operation. Russia is not going to occupy Ukraine. That's not the end goal. That's not the end game for Russia. And Russia has enough resources. We have a big and rich country. We have a lot of commodities, so we can live autonomously without attacking any other state. In November 2021, Putin explained in detail to NATO partners, please bring out your weapons from Ukraine, stop pumping European countries with the nuclear weapons. That would bring to no peace. And all the talks that the US nuclear weapons in Europe against the Islamic fundamentalism, you know, it's fairy tale. Stop it. Cut this stuff. So why do we need to have this confrontation between the biggest nuclear powers like it was in before 1991 in Germany? So does the world need that another time? Do we need another Cuban crisis? Will the planet survived through this Cuban crisis 60 years ago in Washington and in Moscow. There were smart people who could avoid this nuclear disaster. But right now, you know, this situation is different, and the nuclear hegemony is not the factor of dominance on our planet. We see that the nuclear weapons are not the main thing in hands. We see other states developing without nuclear weapons, creating quite stable economies. And together with our colleagues from the United States, we need to think that the nuclear weapon is, of course, as deterrence weapons. But we need to think ahead about the new treaty, new start treaties, about new agreements and treaties that would provide for the stability and kind of a certainty about the future, because right now it's not the case, absolutely not the case. I believe that in the US and in Europe it's not the best domestic political environment. I see that from the social networks. I see that people are worried about their families, about their homes, about their future, and the war is not a pleasant thing to everyone. I don't know the people who would give a round of applause to the war. Maybe, of course, there are some psychos who can support this bloody war, but we do not do that. Even today's words of the Kremlin, of Mr. Peskov, that Moscow and Putin are always ready for peaceful negotiations if they are supported by the West. But the West doesn't want to do that, doesn't want to cease it, although particularly European leaders are trying to do that, but they are kept shut by Mr. Blinken, who comes to Europe on a regular basis and is doing that. He just tries to put all these possible initiatives to stop any initiative to agree on with Russia, like in 2015 in Minsk Agreement. If the Minsk Agreement had been fulfilled, life in Ukraine would be different today. The people would live peacefully, they would develop further on. Donbass would be in an autonomous region of Ukraine, and it would live its own life. But we have seen what has happened. Unfortunately for Ukraine, the West pumped billions of US dollars and is going to support this project, the project of defeat and destabilize situation in Russia. Therefore, Russia will be compelled to do what it has to do, to conduct war against the representatives of the Kiev regime. But what we are to see in the future. So let's believe that in the planet we have smart people. I'd like to reiterate that Mr. Xi offered the Chinese platform for negotiations and to provide for the peace in Ukraine. Possibly such big actors will achieve results, since it seems to me that America and in Europe, everybody is tired of the war. But even, and you know, there is a collective saturation of this bad news, and they want to see some kind of positive news from the Eurasian continent.
You bring up, again, you started this conversation with bringing up strategic weapons, and you've just discussed it again. So let's go down this path for a second. The United States has just suspended critical aspects of the New START Treaty, data sharing about the deployment of American strategic systems, etc. Both Russia and the United States are in a state of suspension. They both have committed to maintaining the numbers that are associated with the New START Treaty, but this treaty expires in 2026. And both Russia and the United States are involved in a period of modernization of their respective strategic forces. Nuclear missiles are still being built by Russia and deployed by Russia, and America is developing and producing its own new generation of strategic weapons. And if this treaty dies, and right now, there's no talk about a new treaty. There's no discussion. There's no negotiation. So if this treaty dies, there's nothing left to keep these numbers down. And there's a potential for a new arms race, which could lead to not just a new Cuban Missile Crisis, but to Armageddon. The roadblock that appears to exist is the American policy of achieving the strategic defeat of Russia in Ukraine. The Russian government has said that it cannot engage in any dialogue about strategic weapons so long as the United States is pursuing the strategic defeat of Russia. And the United States has not changed its decision. So, in simple terms, the only way to get arms control back on the agenda appears for Russia to win the war in Ukraine decisively. Is Russia prepared to win the war in Ukraine decisively in order to change the strategic dynamic so that arms control could once again be something that can be talked to? Or would a Russian victory in Ukraine forever prevent this kind of discussion about arms control? Are we really it seems to me we're in a very, very dangerous situation where we need sane individuals, responsible individuals who consider the consequences of every action. And as irresponsible as the United States has been, unfortunately, the burden is on Russia. How Russia responds, how Russia proceeds is the key to a peaceful resolution of this problem. Russia appears to need to win a war, but not win it so decisively as to threaten the United States into continuing to pursue nuclear disarmament. Does this make any sense to you?
In 2010, the New START Treaty was signed by Medvedev and Barack Obama, and from that time on, within the second decade, there were 300 events when the inspectors from the United States arrived in Russia, and the Russian specialists arrived in the United States and controlled the number of deployed military warheads on the strategic delivery systems. After that, after the pandemic time, within 2 or 3 years, these mutual visits were stopped, were frozen. But by the time the situation, the geopolitical situation was quite difficult, I would like to remind you that from 2021, when Washington and Brussels started supporting lethal weapons into Ukraine, at that time, from spring 2021, there were anti-tank missile systems, different mobile missile system, light infantry vehicles, and it was clear that the pumping of the military weapons would lead to something, would lead to war. And all the talks that there was support for the defensive operations aimed only at the defense of Ukraine. It was clear even in Russia that the West was going for a big war campaign.